Hello, it's so good to see you today. Here is my hope. The whole reason that we're taking an hour during a really busy time to talk about decluttering toys is that I truly believe that if you will be willing to go pretty far with decluttering and simplifying your kids' toys, that it is going to make you feel like a better mom. It's going to make your kids happier and more content. It is going to make your household feel more peaceful. And you are going to feel like you have a better grip on motherhood. I truly believe that from my own experience, but also what I've heard from hundreds and hundreds of other moms that as they have highly simplified and decluttered their kids' toys, that their kids are just more happy and content. And so we really want that for you too. So this morning, we're kind of going to divide this up into two different sections. So what we're going to discuss today, we're going to talk about, well, what is the role of toys in my child's life? How many toys do kids actually need? How do I declutter toys, especially if they're overly attached to them? And then some very good questions that always come up, like, will I traumatize my child if I declutter their toys, if I declutter their favorite thing and they realize it? Will fewer toys actually make my life harder? And then of course the questions that always come up about Legos and stuffed animals, those are usually hot buttons in these types of discussions as well. So we will definitely talk about that as well. So it's so good to see you this morning. I'm really glad that we can have this conversation. I sometimes shy away from it because I've learned that talking about kids' toys is very loaded, especially if we had experiences in our own childhood where maybe there was some trauma or disappointment or regrets. Maybe we didn't have a lot of toys and other kids do, and we were very envious of them. There's actually a lot of emotions that can be tied into our kids' toys. And so we're going to unpack some of that today. I probably could have added to the list too of the frequently asked questions. What if I'm really attached to the toys, even though the kids don't actually care about them that much? Because I definitely found myself in that boat as well. So let's set the stage for how we're looking at decluttering kids' toys, because I think it's important that that you understand the lens that I'm looking at this through. So I asked a group of moms. I said, as a mom, what is your goal for your kids? And these were the answers, and I think they resonate with us. We want kids who are happy. Isn't that the number one goal for us as moms? We want kids who are happy. We want kids who are content. Ideally, too, we'd like for them to be creative and friendly. I mean, we want them to get along with the other kids on the playground, right? We don't want those phone calls from the teacher saying, like, your child isn't getting along, right? We want who are capable, kids who are in control and in control of their own emotions, and kids who are problem solvers. I think most of us recognize that if our kids can be good problem solvers, that's going to help lead to a lot of success in life. And so, what I want to do this morning is I have some information here that I want to share with you on the front end about why it's so important, what's the point of simplifying our kids' toys, and then I'll definitely leave some room for your questions at the end as well. So I'm going to try and keep the blinders on and not look at the comments right now as I go through this, but do know that I will leave some time at the end for questions, and I would love for you to share your questions then. So let's start out with a really important question. How many toys do kids actually need? And so I love this. This is from Deborah McNamara, who is a clinical counselor, and she actually wrote a book called Rest, Play, and Grow, a manual for parents. And she says that children need to play, but this doesn't require toys. They will explore their environment and examine articles that are interesting to them, from pots and pans to blocks. In other words, kids do need something to play with, but that doesn't have to be toys. Your home likely has enough objects to keep them entertained and learning. And I do want to make all of these slides available at the end. So we will put a link. We will send them out to everyone on our email list. If you haven't signed up for our emails for this workshop, then we'll just have a link where you can sign up, and then this will be emailed out to you afterwards as well. And so this brings us, though, to an important question, is what is actually the role of toys in our child's life? Because it's important to recognize that we have been greatly influenced by marketing. So, toys are actually a $19 billion industry. And, we're recording this right before Christmas. And so, all you see are toy commercials. And it's influencing our children. They believe that toys will make them happy. But it also carries over to us as adults that we are also led to believe that getting the right toy for our kids at Christmas or birthdays or other times of the year is what is going to lead to a happy child, a content child, all those other things that we listed out. So the marketing is working very hard to convince us that it is the toys that lead to a happy childhood. And they're working on our kids, and then they're also working on us. And I actually just read a really fascinating thing. Most of us grew up with the TV on in the background. I mean, frequently, not necessarily all the time. And I remember seeing commercials for toys and different things. But it was just kind of this like peripheral thing that was on in the background. What they're finding now is that when kids are on devices like a phone or an iPad or something that's closer to them, it's a more personal experience. Where when the TV was on in the background, it was more of a community experience. But when it's right in their face and they're seeing these ads, they're actually sensing that the toy is being personally brought to them and personally recommended to them that it will make them happy. And obviously, kids are not able, I've been talking about this a lot with my kids, they're not able to distinguish marketing and hyped up expectations with our experience as adults that no, that product's not going to last, right? It's not going to make you happy. It's going to break after a few uses or whatever. They're not able to distinguish that. And again, it's different from like a TV that's just on in an open room compared to this very personal experience. Like they actually sense that it's being personally recommended to them and that this truly is going to help them to be happier. That's intense, right? And so that's something that again we're having to battle as parents, and then also find ways to help talk about this with our kids and manage this with our kids. So just so you understand, it's a little different, the way our kids are being marketed to compared to how we grew up. So something to keep in the back of our mind. So with that being said, again, what is the role of toys? How many do we need? Do we actually need them to achieve these goals that we talked about a few minutes ago? And so here's what's so important to recognize. Toys should enhance play. Play offers many essential impacts on the brain. Play makes the prefrontal cortex, the front part of our brain here, bigger and work faster. Playing experiences revolutionize the connections of the neurons at the front end of the brain. If your child doesn't play, then the neurons remain unchanged. Play is important as the prefrontal cortex is the executive control center of the brain. That's the place where the brain regulates emotions, creates a plan, solves problems, and enjoys happiness. Consequently, most scientists confirm that play is key to the healthy development of the child. And this has definitely been something, especially as we've got like into homeschooling more and stuff. I've learned a lot more about the role of play because it's very easy to think, oh, we need to do all school all the time, and our house needs to look like what it looked like when the kids were going to school, and so we need 8 hours of instruction and all of this. And so many moms would say, when they're playing, they are learning so much. And I would be kind of like, are you sure? Like, all of us, we have that fear, like, I don't want my kids to fall behind. I probably should have had on that list. We want our kids to be smart too, right? And so that is worksheets and flashcards and all of the things, right? It is fascinating if you look at the role of play in our children's lives and how much brain development goes on from play. They are problem solving. They're learning about gravity and mechanics and all of these and social interactions. They are learning so much from play. And so this should be good news to us as moms. If there's dads watching too, that's awesome. But as parents, this should be very good news to us because what it's telling us is that we don't have to always be structuring our child's time. We just have to set up an environment where they succeed in play. Now, again, if we look at our own childhood compared to now, when we were kids, there wasn't as much competing with our attention, right? We didn't have iPads and different things. And so, I mean, we just naturally played a lot, right? But now there's different things competing for our children's time and things that we have to manage as parents, because something flashing in our kids' face on an iPod is naturally more engaging to them than going outside to play, right? So we have different battles now, even though we know having something on the iPod is not developing their brain in the same way as going outside to play. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more too. But again, now as we're looking at the role of toys, how many toys do we need? What toys should we keep? Then I think it's really important. And what I have learned is that it's actually a child's imagination that keeps them occupied and not the toys. So you can see in this picture here, Gage had created a rocket ship out of a plastic bottle, right? He was using his imagination to create that. And again, what the marketing tells us is that if our kids are unengaged, if they're crabby, if they don't want to play well on their own, then we haven't found the right toy, right? So we keep finding different toys until they can stay occupied with these toys and that they're happy and content. And that is completely backwards. What we find is that it's our child's imagination that keeps them occupied. And so again, if play is our actual goal, then we look at toys that enhance that, and we get rid of the toys that don't lend itself to that. And you'll notice this, like if you have a child in a room that has a lot of toys in it, what they do is they bounce from one toy to the next toy to the next toy, and they never get fully engaged. But if you look at the research and what you've probably experienced with your own kids, when they have very few options of what they can play with, then they are much more likely to find one thing and stick with it and get fully engrossed in play. And that, I truly believe, when my kids are fully engrossed in their play and their imagination and what they're doing, that is when they are the most content, they are the most happy, and they are the least crabby, right? But again, this means developing their imagination and encouraging play, not finding just the right tools. And so, or right toys. And so what we do then is when we're looking at our children's toys and we're talking about decluttering them today, so what toys actually help them to get engrossed? And so those are usually the open-ended toys. My slides got a little out of order here. I'm trying to see where my so open-ended toys like Legos, blocks, magnetiles. We would have like a few baby dolls, a few trucks and tractors. So here's a picture of Gage when he was little. So we had often people ask like, well, okay, you're a minimalist. Like, how many toys did you actually keep for your kids? So if you can see kind of off to his right, the left side of the picture, we have these we had the IKEA bins and system that held them. And so we had 2 bins of Duplos, 2 bins of blocks. We had a bin of trucks and tractors, and then we had a couple bins of like doll things and some play food. But that was it as our kids were growing up. And then they did, again, going back to like this slide, they made tons of things. We would always have like painter's tape, readily available masking tape. They made so many creations out of like cardboard and recycling and those types of things. So again, what's available to our child isn't just the toys that we're providing them, it's also giving them opportunities to create and to play with their environment around them. And so even when our kids go outside to play, we provide very little for them outside, but it's so fun to see the things that they come up with outside. So again, our kids don't need toys to be happy or engaged or content. It's helping them to learn how to use their imagination and creating an environment that is successful for play, which is actually a very simplified environment. And we know this now as adults too. It's scientifically proven, like even as an adult, if I walk into a cluttered space, whether it's my home or somewhere else, the cortisol, the stress hormone is released because our brain is having to index. Our brain is constantly scanning for threats. And so that's just a self-protection. That's part of our body's design, and it's good, right? We want to know if there's any threats around us. And so in a very cluttered and overwhelming space, it is very stressful for our body to try and decide what is a threat and what isn't. And I also learned this too, even especially stuff on the floor is very threatening to our body, because if you think about like being in the wild, that's often where like a predator would come from, would be down low. Or if you were to, step on something that could hurt you or anything like that, we're constantly scanning the floor. So if there's clutter on the floor, and I know many of us are probably thinking of our children's bedrooms right now, like, oh, wow, they must just feel so threatened in there because there's so much stuff on the floor, right? But again, what do we do with this information is that it helps us, again, as we're going to get to the decluttering, it helps us to understand why is it so important to have highly simplified toys and simplified spaces for our kids. It's very easy as adults and for kids in a simplified environment to be able to scan it, to be like, oh good, I'm safe here. I can let my guard down. Whew, I can relax, I can recharge, and I don't have to be on guard here. And isn't that the gift we want to give to our kids, as well as for ourselves too? Okay, so let's then get into the nitty gritty. How do we actually declutter toys, and do we do it with our kids, without our kids? How do we actually go about this? And so let's just talk about through a few tactics we can use when we're decluttering toys. Okay, so number one, I think it's important to remember that our kids don't actually understand the goal of decluttering. So, I'm telling you that clutter makes us feel stressed, it puts us on edge, it makes us worry that there's predators around us, right? Kids don't understand that. Kids are hardwired to believe that more is better. The more toys they have, the more of everything they have, that is going to be better. So, depending on the ages of your kids right now, progress might be slow in the beginning because they simply don't understand the benefits of having a highly simplified space. But that's okay. Keep working at it because it is too important not to keep working at. Like we talked about, strive to keep the open-ended toys like Legos, blocks, magnet tiles, a few dolls, cars, or trucks. And so, what I don't want you to worry about is what if I simplify and get rid of the wrong toys? There's no right or wrong when it comes to this, but we have found that open-ended toys do engage your kids longer, again because it leads to imaginative play. It was so fascinating to me when our kids would be playing with their Duplos, and one day they're just using them very traditionally as Legos to build a little house and whatnot, and then the next day they're play food, and then the next day they're their money and it's their currency that they're using to play with, and the next day they're building a ramp for one of their trucks to go off of. And so these open end toys, they let our children's imagination thrive. And I think the frustration of many of the toys out there now that make noise and they're kind of obnoxious is that that's the opposite. It does the opposite. It puts our kids on edge. It makes them agitated. It overstimulates them. And so, really, like, we try to have no toys that have batteries or make noise. Again, just because I understand those actually agitate kids and they don't lead them to that content, imaginative play. And excuse me, as far as deciding should they help or not, evaluate the age of your child. Will they be helpful, or are they too young to understand what they're doing? So I've shared this story before. When we first significantly decluttered our kids' toys, they were ages like 4, almost 5 and under. And so I actually had Tom take all of the kids away for a Saturday morning. And what I did was I boxed them all up. And so anything that didn't fit into our IKEA toy bins and those open-ended categories that I had decided on, then I just boxed it up. And my logic was that if they ask for a toy, I will get it back out for them. But I had been researching it and learning more about minimalism and simple living, and I just really wanted to try it out and see how it would go. And so I boxed up there was boxes and boxes of toys, right? We had 4 kids, and I just thought we needed more toys to keep them happy. My mom and I would go to garage sales and get them inexpensively. We got all the birthday gifts and Christmas gifts. So I boxed them all up. I put them in the garage. And so I was prepared when the kids came back home to be like, and they were like, I was sure their reaction was going to be, where are all of our toys? And I was prepared to say, don't worry, they're in the garage. I will gladly pull them back out. Not a single child asked where any single toy was. They walked in to our family room where all the toys had been, and they just loved the space. They went to the toy bins and started playing. Maggie, who was 3 at the time, she was like, there's room to dance. She's like our gymnast and our dancer, and she's just like dancing. Nobody cared. Right now, I know that's not the same for all of our children, and we do have one that's more attached now. He was just too young at the time, so we're going to talk about that. But um we have to know, like, are our kids at an age where it's going to be helpful to go through this process with them or not? And if they are like 5 and under, there is a good chance that we could do this and use time will tell boxes and box it up and let them experience it. Again, they don't understand what the benefits are of a simplified space yet, right? They're going to learn it very quickly, but they don't understand yet. So using a time will tell box can be very helpful. I have that. So that's the second point here. Use time will tell bins to test out having fewer toys. And then I like to pack the boxes if you're like using regular boxes in a way that they can just be completely donated. So if you know you have any like heirloom toys, something that's super special, then don't put that in these boxes. Like have them separate or put them in your memory bin or your child's memory bin. Um, but it's really nice if then the boxes can just be donated without having to look in them again. When we revisit stuff that we've kind of time tested and separated ourselves from, we can be tempted to keep it. Definitely don't let your kids look at it again. The ideal situation is just to be able to move to donate them once we're done with this experiment. So put a date on them, donate after, and usually 3 months is plenty of time. Honestly, after a couple weeks or a month, you're going to know if the kids are asking for anything back out. And then if they do want to ask for something back out, I just say you can like specifically ask for something like a toy combine and I will go get that. I don't let them go see the boxes or go out to it or anything like that. It's just like I will get that one thing that you remembered. And then the rest of it is still going to stay packed away. Now, if your kids are a little bit older, like 6 and up, what we start to run into is that they have gotten toys as gifts. They have spent their own money on toys. And so now it's a little bit different. And so there is a tactic I like to use where you can pay them for their toys. So you can say, here is a box or a laundry basket or whatever. If you fill this up with toys or different things in your room that you're not using, I'm going to give you $5. And I know the pushback on this has sometimes been kids of like, our parents have said, like, are you bribing your kids? Are you manipulating them? I don't know. And the way I look at it is a value exchange. Because again, if you have kids that are very attached to their things, often the attachment it can be complicated. Sometimes it's because they really like that thing and they really value it. Often it's more of like a power struggle or a sense of control that they have, which is fine, right? And so that's where if I offer to pay them for it, it causes them to look at the value exchange. So which is more important to me right now, $5 or these toys or different things that I've been hanging on to? And 99% of the time they are willing they would rather have the $5 because the toys are old news and like we know they're not actually playing with them anyways. Right? And so 99% of the time they will take you up on that offer. Another tactic that I like to use is to have create a clear floor policy. So what we try to teach our kids, and this is something then that we have to adhere to as well. So I should probably back up. The first point on this slide is to model it yourself. So as you declutter, talk through why you're parting with things and the mistake purchases that maybe you've made. And so talking through like, I thought when I bought this bread maker that we were going to make homemade bread all of the time. And I'm just learning that I don't have time for it. But I'm not going to keep things in our home anymore that aren't serving me. Stuff is meant to serve us and to make our life better. So this isn't serving me. It really stinks that I spent money on it, but I'm not making use of it. So I'm going to let it go. So we talk this out loud with our kids so they can understand that we're doing this ourselves. I'm not asking something of them that I haven't done, but also so that they start to understand the logic behind this and then have a clear floor policy. So again, these are all just ideas. You can pick and choose what works best for your family and the stage that you're in. So if I see items on the floor, what I've communicated to the kids that if there's stuff on the floor, to me that says it's not being taken care of. Because if I have something that's special or valuable to me, I don't keep it on the floor. It is stored properly in a shelf, in a drawer, somewhere where stuff is supposed to live. The floor is not a storage spot for things. And so if it's in like one of the common living spaces, if there's something on the floor, and I will say like, okay, Corbin, you need to pick that up, please. And if he doesn't, then it's just, we've communicated that if you don't pick it up after I've asked you to, then it's mine. And I get to decide what's done with it, whether it's thrown away, donated, or on some occasions, very few, if it's something that's like really expensive or I know they actually want, but maybe they're just kind of like in a mood right now or something, then I will give them the opportunity to earn it back. But most of the time it means it's going in the garbage or the or donated, because what that's communicating to me, if they won't even take 10 seconds to pick it up, is that they've lost value for it. And I can't have more value for their things than they do, right? And so if they have lost value for it, which is very common, I mean, our kids, they're drowning in stuff, right? They have so much stuff around them, and they don't value it anymore. And that's okay, right? It kind of stinks because sometimes I'm like, wow, are my kids like just, I don't know. They have no value for stuff. They don't care about stuff. They just think you just get a new one if something breaks. And I have worried about that. But the truth is, it's the world they're living in. Stuff is very easy to come by. It's very easy to replace. And so it's just the world we live in. So I'm not going to try and I try for them not to be wasteful. Like we don't just say, oh, if it's broke, I'm just going to get a new one. But it is also balancing that with like, I can't make them value something more then I can't value it more than they do. And so then it goes in the garbage or it gets let go. And then also, though, that becomes something that we talk about in their bedrooms as well. Because what I want as a parent is I want to have the amount of inventory that they're managing. I want it to be the right amount for their current stage of life. And so, how can we tell if they have too much inventory? Well, they're not able to take care of it on their own. Like, do we help our kids sometimes? Absolutely. But mostly for their own bedrooms and the toys that we have, for every age and stage, it should be the right amount of inventory that they can pick it up and they can take care of it. And again, if we look at like the big picture, what is my point? Toys are an awesome opportunity to teach our kids how to manage their own inventory, right? And so inventory is something that I talk a lot about for us as adults, that every item in our home is inventory that I have to manage, that I have to take care of. And so I want to match the inventory in my home to my current season of life. But this is an awesome time to teach our kids that as well, because I know many of us, we're like, well, I wish I would have learned these skills growing up, right? And it's okay, we didn't. And we've entered into a new era, but our kids are going to have to deal with even more stuff than we have, right? So I really want to make sure that they learn these skills while they're in my home. Will they be perfect at it? Will all of them fully embrace it? No. But could it be something that they draw on as they get older? Most likely, right? So it's a very important concept that I want them to learn. So we talk about if stuff is consistently on the floor, then we probably still have too much inventory in your room. And so again, do we need to use a time will tell bin to just box some stuff up and see if we actually miss it? Do I need to offer a bounty, like fill up this box and I'll give you $5? Or do I just simply need to say, I'm sorry, like this is how we're going to move forward in our household. And so I do need you to figure out a way to be able to organize and take care of this stuff. Otherwise, we do have to let some of it go. And again, this is a process, especially if our kids are a little bit older. But I do think it's something that we keep working at and go layer by layer with them because it's so important. And again, we know kids and adults thrive in simplified spaces. Okay, so let's talk a little bit then about some of the common questions that come up. Well, let's just start with the big one at the beginning. Okay, so will it traumatize my kids if I declutter their favorite toy, something that was their favorite? So maybe some of us have experience that we have maybe done some decluttering. We thought they didn't care about it anymore. They wouldn't notice that it was gone. Maybe it was kind of in the back of our mind. They might notice, but I'm hoping they won't. And so we've donated some things or gotten rid of things that then they came back to say they wanted, it was their favorite and all of that, right? Have I traumatized my kids? And so this was something that I asked a child psychologist. This was, I wanted to make sure we get this right. Like trauma is a big buzzword in our culture right now. Obviously, I don't want to be promoting anything that is going to harm our kids in the long run, right? And what they said is this, is that if you are not quite literally taking your kids' toys and burning them in the front lawn, you're probably not traumatizing them. And where trauma comes from is it's really a lot of the motive behind it. And so if we are loving parents who have overall a pretty good relationship and track record with our kids, there will be times when we make mistakes. And the biggest thing and what our kids are going to learn from is, what do we do if we made a mistake? Now, if I donated something, which I have done, and I donated something, they're like, that was my favorite, I want it again. What I say to them is, I'm so sorry I made a mistake. I thought you weren't using it anymore because it hasn't been played with in a few months. I thought you had kind of done with it and had outgrown it. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize that you wanted to play with that still. How can I make it up to you? Now, if it is like a huge deal, I would maybe offer to buy it to them again. But most often, what I'm recognizing is that it's not actually about the thing. It's more about, again, a little bit of control. Uh, and so what I'll usually offer is, could we play a game together? Could we bake together? Could we go for a walk? Even just when I go for walks, the kids like to come for on a walk with me. And so I will offer to spend time with them because, again, going back to the beginning, our kids are drowning in stuff and they are desperate for human connection. And so I want to offer, I don't necessarily want to offer them more stuff again. I want to offer them undivided human connection. And they have always taken me up on that. I don't think I've ever had to rebuy a toy or craft project or anything like that. But what am I teaching my kids? That I can admit when I'm wrong if I've made a mistake, and then I will find a way to make it up to them. And so that is a valuable lesson. And our kids, they need to experience that, right? They need to understand that we're not perfect, and they need to learn even in their own life if they make a mistake, what do we do? And so that is something really powerful that we can model to them. So no, you don't. If you have a fairly good relationship with your kids, you've been really fairly consistent in their lives. They don't have previous trauma around toys. So again, when we were going through like the licensing process for foster care, that's a different situation, right? If kids come in with stuff or acquire stuff, I mean, they say don't even throw away a gum wrapper because that might be the last thing they got from their biological parent, right? So that's a very different situation, and I look at that stuff completely different than my own kids who don't have previous trauma around their toys or their personal belongings. So for most of us watching this today, if you care even about decluttering your kids' toys and creating a successful environment for them, I'm guessing you have a pretty good relationship and you don't have to worry about traumatizing your children. And if you were to make a mistake, then it is okay to admit it and just let them know how we're going to move forward. But often, even kids that are like overly connected to stuff, often that's coming more out of a desire to have your attention than it is actually about the physical items. Okay. What about stuffed animals? Right? I hear so many parents, the stuffed animals are taking over. So, a few tactics for that. I heard this one time and it said, have a set number where the kids can have the same number of stuffed animals on their bed as their current age. So, if your kids are still a little bit younger, this could be a great thing to put into practice. It will be the gift that keeps on giving, right? If you're already kind of past that, a great thing to do is to find ways to corral them. So, excuse me. If you on Amazon, you'll find like these corner nets that you can put them in. I don't know. Some of us probably had them as kids growing up as well. Cass from Clutterbug, she'll say to like get a hamper to put them in. And also, you've also probably seen on Amazon too, they have like those like beanbag chairs, but they're empty. And so they're meant to be filled up with stuffed animals. Now, again, we have to talk to our kids about if you're not managing them well, if they're always on the floor or everywhere, then we have to probably cut down the number that we have. And then that's where actually using a time will tell bin can be very helpful as well. And, what happens with kids a lot of times is they decide every single animal is special, but we all know that's not true. So if we say, okay, we're going to set aside half of them. So you get to pick out half that stay either on your bed or in the hammock or in the hamper or whatever. So half of them go in there and half go in this box. They'll start to pick out their true favorite ones. And again, this is a really good exercise in inventory management. But I try to put it kind of back on them of you can keep as many as you can manage. And what that means is they're not on the floor, they're not all over. When we go to bed at night, they are back in their home, wherever that would be. So it's something it really depends on the child and how much they can actually manage. Okay, similarly, what about Legos? And so again, going back to Legos it is inventory that our child has to manage. So how much can they actually manage? And by manage, I mean, how many can they pick up at the end of the night? It again, in our home, we try to have the expectation that all toys are picked up at the end of the night. And if the kids aren't able to pick them all up, that means they have too many. And so I know Legos are a huge pain in the butt for a lot of parents, but I think it's because the kids are trying to manage too much. We are keeping every Lego they have ever gotten. And so the second tactic here is to pack some of them away. So select a portion of the Legos to pack away for a season to see if it's better with fewer. I think you're going to find that your kids still play with them just as much. We have simplified our Legos down to two clear plastic bins. I mean, they are not big bins at all. And that's what it always has to fit into there. And we have been using that. Our boys are 8 and 9. Well, and then Maggie's 11. She loves to play with Legos still too. They have these two small bins and that's what they play with. And so they don't need to have all of their Legos all of the time to be creative and to get engrossed in their Legos. And then also, if you have children that if they create like the kits that are like really cool things or like Star Wars things, or Gage just made like a John Deere tractor kit that he got, often they want to display it or have a safe spot for that. And so this is where we use like the container concept, or we set a boundary. So you can keep any Lego creation that fits on here, that fits in this cube shelf, or fits on this shelf in your room or on the top of your dresser. But once they don't start to fit there anymore, then we might have to look at some that we're going to store elsewhere, or we're going to deconstruct them and put them back in the box, or whatever you might do then. But again, this is a great skill to be teaching our kids. So having a designated spot where they can display their Legos and they can keep anything that fits there, but that is our limit for how much we keep. Okay. So again, but what, Dawn, if my kids is just really attached to things and like they notice if I get rid of, one sock out of their room, there's like, where is my favorite sock? And so we have one child that is definitely much more attached. And so we have some bins that we call them treasure bins. And he is allowed to keep anything in there. So he keeps little things he gets from the dollar store. If he got a Happy Meal, he would keep that in there, little art projects that he fits. And so he actually has 3 of these bins. None of the other kids do because they don't care, but he does. And so he has 3 of these bins, and he can keep anything in there that he wants to. They're his treasure bins, and he knows I won't take anything out of there. But we do have to go through them occasionally because the stuff isn't fitting. And what you'll find is often the stuff at the bottom has now kind of expired. It's not as special anymore. So when we go through, I usually try to start at the stuff at the bottom, the older art projects he's made, the older stuff from the dollar store that's broken, and all of that. And so again, this is teaching our kids such an important skill. You can keep anything that is super special, but not everything can be super special. And I know the question often comes up too, like, do you let your kids buy stuff at the dollar store? Like, we all know it just breaks, it's not good quality. And I do, because I think it's been a really good lesson for them to experience with their own money. What happens when I buy stuff from there? How long does it last? How long do I have it? Are they good buying decisions? And so we actually now, because I've let my kids do that, I don't just tell them like, oh no, we're not going in there because all that stuff's crap and there's no point. You're not going to waste your money in there. I've let them have that experience on their own. And now they very infrequently ask to go to the dollar store. And if we do, like, they've gotten like gift cards there. Sometimes they'll earn like a couple dollars for my mom and they're like, well, let's go to the dollar store. Often then they get like candy or more consumable stuff or craft supplies, and not necessarily like the little toys from there. So I feel like that's been a really good lesson for them. And now the next place they ask to go to is Five Below, right? But we're going through that same like learning curve now at Five Below as well. So it kind of is what it is. Okay, I did have, I don't think, okay. So again, as we look at what's the point, right? Why is it so important to simplify and declutter our kids' toys, is to remember this, that kids thrive in simplified spaces, especially, we didn't talk about this too much, but if they have been diagnosed with, or you have concerns of ADD, ADHD, autism, OCD, other behavioral concerns, the research, it just is so overwhelming. It shows that kids thrive in simplified spaces. And it's been fun. I mean, we don't have experience with ADHD or ADD or autism, but it has been so fun to hear from other moms in our community that their kids with those diagnoses thrive in simplified spaces. It might be a little more work doing the decluttering because sometimes they can be a little more attached to stuff. And so we have to like really pull out like all of these tactics. But if you will go through that process with your children, it has been so fun to hear parents that say that their kids are thriving in these highly, highly simplified spaces. And so I hope that's encouraging to you, because this is a win-win for our kids and for us as parents, because we don't have to try and manage so many toys anymore either. Now I know Christmas is right around the corner, so what do you do? Kids are going to get toys. We have the mother-in-law that just has to give the biggest best thing ever and all this. um, Two things. I try to communicate ahead of time. Here are experiences, consumables, things that will get used up, or something that they really want that I do believe will lead to creative play. So I try to be proactive with things that I recognize or that I can suggest that would be good gifts for our kids. I also, depending on the person, I try to share kind of what I'm learning. Wow, I've noticed when the kids have too many toys, they're hyperactive, they're snotty, they're crabby. But as we've simplified, and like I'll tell my mom, I'm like, isn't this like just so counterintuitive that like actually decluttering our toys and having them be really simplified, the kids are so much more calm and content. And so I just kind of like share with my loved ones, like, wow, we've been experimenting over the past year and they are thriving in this environment. I think, the world's so chaotic and stimulating. I think it's just nice for them to be able to come home and, have a really peaceful place to be. And so I just try, it's taken multiple years, but I try to communicate that to them. But there are some family members, it goes in one ear and out the other, right? And so they do. It's like it's a contest to see who can get our kids the biggest toy. And so the stuff comes in and the kids might play with it for a little bit again, but then it goes out again. If it is not, again, lending itself to our environment of nurturing creative play, then it's time for it to move out. And we have done this so many times in our house. It is not a big deal. Most often the kids like bring it to me. They're like, you can declutter this. You can let other kids play with it. You can bring it to the donation center. And yes, have we had family members come in and you can tell they are looking around like, where's the Barbie dream house that I got last birthday? And the kids have said, oh, mom donated it, and I'm just like, oh no, they're going to hate me. They're going to whatever. And I'm like, you know what? I have to protect this environment in our home. It's awkward. It kind of sucks, but like, I know my kids need this. And so I have to do whatever I have to do to protect that. And, we worry too, like, are people going to think I'm a bad mom? I was convinced in the beginning that my mom thought I had completely lost it. We had 4 little kids and you walk in and you can hardly see any toys anywhere. I was just like, oh shoot, what are they going to say? But here we are now 8 years later. And my kids, we go anywhere. If we're in the car for a long time, if we're in an airplane, if we're at a restaurant, I mean, it's almost embarrassing now when people come up and they're like, your kids are so well behaved. I want to be like, I didn't do anything special. We don't like have training at home, like how to act in a restaurant. I just set up an environment where it cultivated their imagination, and that goes with them wherever we go. So they can get engrossed and they can be creative wherever we are. It is the gift that keeps on giving. Because no matter where we go, they have their imagination with them. One other question I just thought of that I had seen recently was, okay, Dawn, you live in the country. Your kids can play outside often. So you probably need fewer toys than those of us who might live in an apartment or live in town. That might be true just a little bit, but honestly, if I could like show you out the window right now, we have snow and it is so cold right now. It is windy. Like a day like today, the kids will probably go outside for maybe an hour at most. And that means the rest of the waking hours, they are inside just like your kids are. And so, again, it was the shift in my mind that it's not toys that keep them occupied, it's their imagination. And so truly the best things that I give and provide for my kids on days like this are cardboard and markers and masking tape. If you knew how many rolls of masking tape we have gone through in our house, a hot glue, now they're a little older, oh man, they have like some straws and hot glue, like they are occupied for hours and it's beautiful and they're so happy, right? And so I don't know if that's true or not, but when your kids say they're bored, you just say, "Oh, go." Like in our house, if someone comes up to me and says I'm bored, I'm like, "Oh, awesome! Will you go unload the dishwasher? There's some laundry that needs to be put away. Can you go do that quick?" So they just know that their boredom is not my problem, and as parents, it's not our problem to solve. But creativity lies just on the other side of boredom, and so you keep pushing them past boredom until they get engaged and they find something to play with, and most often it's not even a toy. So that's how we cultivate this imagination and this creativity in their own lives. Okay, I am going to step down off of my soapbox now. And I do want to take some time to answer questions. So thank you for being patient with me. I just believe this is so important. So, and again, I'm not even trying to push my own convictions onto you. I hope it's something that you continue to be curious about and learn for yourself, because that's where my convictions have come from, is doing my own research and experimenting with my own kids, seeing how it plays out in their lives, but then now also what I've heard from so many other moms. And so it's hard not to be passionate about it. Um, Cultivating an imagination is so important. I already limit my kids' electronics and encourage some boredom, and they are so much better behaved. Yeah, so it is important to understand that electronics are very stimulating to our kids' developing brains. And so honestly, our kids get 15 minutes a day on the internet, and off they'll like watch YouTube videos or different things. We do some homeschool stuff like math that they do on the computer, but otherwise I really try to protect their developing brains from it. It is not easy. It is so much easier to plug them in. Like, please understand. And there are days where that's just what we have to do. I'm not that much different than you, right? But if we will let them get bored, and take the electronics away, let them get bored, you'll find that your kids are fully capable of this too. You haven't ruined your kids by any means. I'm going to get my kids a big box of rolls of tape for Christmas, and I can guarantee it will be one of their favorite gifts. Yes, absolutely. I just heard from another mom who said that she gave that last year and it was her child's favorite gift. I like the inventor box crafts. It seems so fun. Yeah, so we have this thing, and I can link to it too, where we made inventors boxes. And basically, it's like tape and popsicle sticks and straws and some string and just different things that they can make their own creations. Googly eyes. It's super fun. I think I'm more attached to some toys than my kids are. I think this has more to do with my fantasy self, fantasy family. Any tips for letting that go? Thank you. I'm glad you brought this up, because I did mean to circle back to that. This is very natural. I remember when I was growing up, my cousins. So we grew up fairly poor. Like my parent, I always had enough to eat and everything. I never had to worry about that, but there wasn't a lot of extra. And our cousins had everything. We had two different sets of cousins, and it's like every time we went to their house, they always had the newest Nintendo. They had the Nerf guns, and my girl cousins had the Little Tikes dollhouse. It was like the blue. It's like white with a blue roof, and then it had all the little people in the van, and oh my goodness, all this stuff. And I remember being so envious when we would go to their house. I'm like, that is just the coolest. And so fast forward to when I had my own kids and I'm at a garage sale and I see one of these dollhouses for $5 at a garage sale, and I'm like, that is going home with me. And I take it home and the kids don't play with it at all. And I'm like, what? I would have killed to have that when I was a child, right? And so it was very disappointing, especially when I had to load it up in my van and bring it back to Goodwill. And I also, we just more recently then did the same thing with the Barbie Dream House. I thought, well, so here's what happened with that. The kids went to a friend's house. They had a Barbie Dream House, came home and telling me how cool it was. And I was like, okay, we don't have a lot of big toys. I went on Marketplace. I got a Barbie Dream House with lots of furniture with it. I'm like, they're going to love this. They're going to play for hours with this. Played with it once, twice. I don't know what is wrong with my children, right? And I was so confused. I'm like, I would have loved to have these. And now I look back and I'm like, it was a novelty when I would go to someone else's house and play with it, similar to when my girls went to their friend's house and they had it. Maybe if I would have had it of my own in my own house, I wouldn't have actually played with that much. Although my sister and I did play with Barbies a lot, and we had a little house that we played with a lot. So I don't even know why, but that was one of our only toys too, right? And so if something is so special to you, then not like a big dream house, but if there's little things, then you can keep that in your own memory box, or you can have a box of toys that are just for memories. Maybe it's baby toys that your kids have that still really spark happy memories. Maybe there's some things you want to keep for your grandkids or whatever. Just set a container. We have to limit it. And that provides something that we weigh it against. Like, is this worth putting into my memory box? Okay, then it's worth it. But if not, I'll probably let it go. I actually ended up getting rid of all of our Barbies. My mom had kept them, and then eventually it was like, here's your tote of Barbies. And I actually ended up getting rid of them because I realized that the memories I had attached were actually of lack. of we had gotten a skipper. I got a skipper doll for Christmas one year. I didn't even take the clothes off of her because I didn't want anything to happen. I didn't want them to get lost. I didn't want them to get ripped. You know how the seams on Barbie clothes sometimes come apart. And I'm like, I don't even associate happy memories with this Barbie stuff. And so I let it go. And so yes, there's a lot of emotions and feelings tied up into this. So if it's so special, have a container, a memory box that you put them into. But otherwise, sometimes it can be helpful just to share it with someone, speak it out loud, and then it's more easy to let it go. My 5 kids range in age from 3 to 15. Any tips on managing toys that some older kids don't want anymore and have outgrown and were originally theirs, but the younger kids might want as they grow? Same thing. I would just set a limit for it, right? So I'm going to keep one Rubbermaid tote, 2 Rubbermaid totes of stuff for the other kids to grow into. Especially if you know it was toys they really liked, they were really engaging, then just set a limit. We can't keep it all. It becomes too overwhelming. And similarly to a question that comes up, like, Christmas is just around the corner. What if the kids get something that's special to them, but they don't want like a younger sibling to play with? And so we would say that stuff stays in your room. So if it's something that's special to you that you don't want the other kids to play with, then that goes in your room. And maybe you take it down and like play with it at the counter, but like it doesn't go into the living room where like the rest of the toys are. You can't go sit in front of your brother and play with it in front of them if you don't want to also give them a turn on it, So that can be a little tricky to navigate if you have a bigger age spread of kids too. But yeah. One other thing actually that has been so helpful of a tip I heard one time is that if you have 2 kids playing and one has a toy that the other one wants, so if I'm like sitting here playing with my coffee mug and another child comes up and they're like, I want to play with that, what we do is the child that wants to play with it asks, when can I have a turn? 1 to 3 minutes. Again, if it's like a common toy. And the person holding it then gets to decide when can they get to decide 1, 2, or 3 minutes. And so they say, okay, in 3 minutes you can have a turn. Do you know what happens? A large portion of the time, the child that wanted it goes and plays with something else and totally forgets about it. Or the child that has it says, after like 10 seconds, is like, oh, here, you can have it. And then they go on to the next thing. So just like, it's just that it blows my mind like how that works, but that has been really helpful. When can I have a turn with it? 1 to 3 minutes. And they both have power and in the situation. And so that has been a very helpful tip for us, helping to get kids to play together better. But one of the other benefits I didn't even talk about as you simplify toys is that kids play better together when there are fewer toys. There's fewer fights and they're just able to cooperate and play. It is magical. It is so cool. I love it so much. So awesome. Awesome. Well, it has been so fun to get to visit with you again. I'm going to make all these slides available and the replay will be available too. So if you haven't signed up for our email list, I'll make sure that's in the description here as well. We do try to I don't spam you, but we do try to send out helpful things too. But we'll make sure if you do want a copy of all these slides, we'll definitely get that to you. And if you want to watch the replay or share it with anyone else, the best way is actually for them to sign up through that email too, because then they'll get like the full information. But whatever, you can just share it with them too. I think this is really important information. And if you need help decluttering your house or decluttering toys after Christmas and extra stuff comes in, we will be there. So we will be on YouTube with all of our best decluttering tips and tactics. So do know that I'll have you covered. So again, you can always find me on YouTube as The Minimal Mom. We'd love to help you declutter toys, but every other area of your house too, because it is so good and it definitely makes being a mom a lot more enjoyable. I feel like a pretty good mom these days, and I would have never said that in the past. So it has been so helpful to me, and I really want that for you too. So I love you. I hope that you have an awesome weekend, and I'll see you again soon.